What's up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, Buffalo Bills football podcast. We are a little bit more than 24 hours away from final cuts being finalized. The Bills started that journey yesterday, releasing 7 players. No big surprises. Couple of IR spots as well. But we have a little bit of a change up here. A special guest, Ryan Wilson from CBS Sports, kind enough to join us. I saw Ryan at training camp a couple weeks ago. And I said, man, it has been too long. You get going through the grind of this thing, Ryan. And after a couple of years, you're just like, it's been way too long since we've connected. So it's good to have you back on the show.
I'm glad to be here, man. It's good to see you, buddy. To a Western New Yorker and a Central New Yorker trying to keep it real. I'm happy to help you do that.
So I got to admit, I am becoming a little bit of a TikTok.
Okay.
I don't know what the best word is.
Influencer. I think that's what you're looking for.
What is it?
Influencer.
No, I'm not really on the content side. I'm talking about consumption.
Okay.
I am in the algorithm. I get a lot of I coach Little League Baseball. So I get a lot of baseball instructional TikTok videos. But one of the TikToks I saw recently was one of yours where you predicted the Bills 17-game schedule. And I got to say, dude, I'm pretty sure you're the highest on the Bills that I've seen in the national media, coming in at 13 wins. Take me through where your confidence level is at, because correct me if I'm wrong, over the last couple of years, as they've been a Super Bowl contender, you've only been lukewarm on them.
Yeah, lukewarm. That's a good question. How would I feel about them historically? That's funny. I will say this quickly. I'm not on TikTok because I'm considerably older than you. So I'm on Instagram. So I get the algorithms you get 2 weeks later, and I just spend from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. I'm scrolling through my phone, watching stupid things and showing my wife. But it is amazing, like your little league coach, the things that it knows that you want to see. Mm-hmm. And, you're getting drills and stuff, I'm sure. And then, hey, they throw my stupid face in there to make you feel a little bit better about the Bills. So, yeah, maybe lukewarm is the way to feel about it. I think part of it was, this goes back a few years. The whole Nathan Peterman, Tyrod Taylor thing threw me off a little bit, but that's pre-Josh Allen. And then Josh Allen early in his career, he wasn't certainly the guy he is now. And I always come back to, and the turning point for me was that I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the playoff game early in his career in Houston, where he ended up throwing the ball behind his head and things sort of went haywire. And I was like, okay, he has to quit doing that. The next year, he was the new and improved Josh Allen we all now know and love, and one of the best players in the league. But I feel pretty good about this team. And for clarity's sake, I was there for the very last day of training camp. I didn't grind it out like you. So I just showed up for the parade as they went through the walkthrough. But you go through these schedules, and this is something I was specifically asked to do for social media to engage people like you on TikTok. But I was trying to be realistic about this, and I had them losing in week 2 at Miami. It's a Thursday night game, so maybe the heat and humidity is an issue there. The sun will be down, obviously, and Miami's much better when the weather's warmer than when December rolls around. I had them losing to at Baltimore 2 weeks later because that's a tough game, but they can certainly win that football game. I have them losing in week 8 on the road at Seattle. Tough place to play. Geno Smith is one of my favorite players. You talk about someone who's sort of rediscovered himself after leaving New York, and fingers crossed, maybe there's hope for Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold in that regard. But that team is going to be good, especially defensively with Mike McDonald, their new head coach. And then the only other loss, and this is just, maybe things work out in week 17 with Aaron Rodgers. He's still upright. Maybe that team is really good offensively. We know their defense will be good. I have them losing in week 17 to the Jets. And at that point, it may not even matter if they're 13 wins in, or at that point 12 wins in, and their playoff seed is set. They win the division or whatever it may be. And everything else are wins. And they have wins against the Cardinals in the opener. That's going to be in Buffalo. The Cardinals are going to have to travel. They have questions there. They beat the Texans in week 5 on the road. That's going to be a great game. The Titans 2 weeks later at home. Will Levis, see what he's doing there. They hadn't beaten the Chiefs in week 11 right before their bye. And then after the bye, they play San Francisco. Who made the schedule? After the bye, they play San Francisco, also at home. And I haven't won that game. That's a Sunday night game. Follow that with a win against the Rams. Oh, one other game I mentioned. After the Rams game in which they win, and that'll be Kansas City, San Fran, LA, back-to-back wins. Then I have them losing at Detroit as well, which is going to be a tough game in week 15. But it didn't feel difficult to me. It was hard to find the losses, and you can certainly talk yourselves into the wins. And this isn't a case of of a fan being a homer of a team and saying, "Oh, we're going 17-0." This is a case of, all right, show me how this isn't going to work out. Now, you will be able to push back when we talk about a couple things: the defense in terms of the injuries, and then the wide receivers. How are they going to sort themselves out? But I always come back to this: if you have Josh Allen and the offensive line can hold up, and I think this offensive line is better, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, Matt. You're gonna be favored in a lot of games.
So I had them coming in. I came in at 12.
Oh, there we go.
Wins.
Okay.
So we're very aligned. I think if they find a way to win that Chiefs game and then come back off the bye and beat the 49ers, you're talking about at that point in the season with the wins that they'd have under their belt, probably like the betting favorite to win the Super Bowl. And you look at the odds right now. If I'm a Buffalo Bills fan watching this show, I am hammering the Bills at plus 1,700 right now to win the Super Bowl, because you're right. Like, that's the biggest piece of this. Like, Josh Allen isn't going anywhere. He's still there. You saw him perform. I can make an argument, even with the turnovers last year, that was the best season that Josh Allen has put up in his NFL career. He's probably had some better analytical numbers, like overarching, if you did a deep dive into it. But it was the way that he was carrying the team. He was riding up, ascending the mountain as Stephon Diggs was descending the mountain. And you saw those first 6 games where Diggs came out. It was the same old. And then something changed. I mean, you saw the offensive coordinator change. He was very ineffective down the stretch. And I thought that the Bills offense maintained. They reimagined what they could be. And that's, to me, when I go on national radio shows and I talk about the Bills, the thing that people are the most surprised about is when I talk about the offensive line being the strength that it is. I don't think people really understand this is a team that had all of their starters play the entire season last year. I thought that was one of the big pieces why this offense was so good. They're returning 4 of those 5, and the one new guy, David Edwards, is an Aaron Kromer throwback to the Super Bowl years in Los Angeles with the Rams. So I think they think they're really good up front. I think they think they're going to be able to run the ball. And then it's like the Kansas City Green Bay model, right? Like, build this thing around a bunch of guys where you can't zero in on one guy. And they're hoping that this Dalton Kincaid kid's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Dalton Kincaid. I want to point out too. I do the draft as well for CBS. I do With the First Pick podcast with Rick Spielman, the longtime Vikings general manager, and we have a lot of fun. And we talked about Austin Booker, who was the 5th round pick, I believe, edge rusher out of Kansas, drafted by the Bears. And I mentioned that because we watched all his reps in week 1 against the Bills, and he got after Deion Dawkins a little bit, whatever. Spencer Brown hit him with a well-timed punch at one point, and it stunned him. And I think Spencer Brown, they talk a lot about Deion Dawkins when they talk about the offensive line. Spencer Brown from afar seems to have gotten a ton better, and he feels like an anchor on the right side. I just wanted to point that out, talking about the offensive line. Osiris Torrance was one of my favorite guys coming out of the draft 2 years ago. The issue with why he fell was because of a knee injury, I believe. Concerns about that, but as far as I know, he's been the model of health, and he's a wild man. Dalton Kincaid, he might lead this team in receptions. How crazy is that? Is that a crazy statement to make?
Not at all. I think that is, if I'm going predictions for the season, we did a recent show, Ryan and I thought I had Kincaid leading the team in receptions, targets, yards, receiving touchdowns. I think
points, everything.
they love the Kansas City model, and I think that they are going to follow that as much as they can. And Kincaid has looked like the real deal. And what's interesting, what do you think about this? They've run a lot of 11 personnel where they during training camp and preseason, where they almost like rotate Kincaid and Knox at times. I think Kincaid's going to get the lion's share of those reps. But what do you think about their kind of gamble on going light at receiver and maybe trying to force Dawson Knox somehow more into this offense, because he kind of disappeared last year after they drafted Kincaid?
And it wasn't necessarily surprising that they drafted Dalton Kincaid because he is a special player. But you talk about Dawson Knox, who came from Ole Miss, where he played with DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown, and he rarely got used there. And you sort of figure out why that offense was sort of weird. So you expect him to be one of these playmakers. And we saw that early on in his career. But it feels a little bit like what the Raiders did with Michael Mayer at Notre Dame last year. And then they went back and got Brock Bowers this year. And that's a different offense. Luke Getsy likes to run the ball. He runs a lot of 12 personnel But this, I have no concern with it. And you talked earlier about how we saw sort of Steph Diggs and Josh Allen pass in the night as one was ascending, the other was descending. When Steph Diggs got there, and I've said this for a while whenever I talk about it, it felt like he did for Josh what Jamar Chase did for Joe Burrow, what Tyreek did for Tua. You get a young quarterback, you get him someone to lean on, and then he leans heavily on them until he gets his footing, and then the quarterback takes over. And I say that to lead to this. Maybe you don't need a Steph Diggs, and you don't have Steph Diggs from 3 years ago anyway, but maybe you can build around those tight ends. And Dalton Kincaid, to your point, special. James Cook is special coming out of the backfield as a receiver. Keon Coleman, I think, has a chance to be really good. I don't know if he's going to put up anything other than Gabe Davis numbers the first year or so, just because he's sort of grown into that role. And he just turned 21, I believe. He was 20 when we talked to him at the combine. And I think with Khalil Shakir and Curtis Martin, I like Khalil a lot. I want to see Curtis be a little bit more consistent. I think you have the pieces in place to get where you need to get. And by that, I mean, when you watch Bryce Young last year, literally no one got open. And people misuse the word literally. I literally mean that no one got open ever running routes. You have guys on this team who aren't superstars, but who can get open. And even if you're not connecting on 40-yard bombs, you have guys who can get open on slants or ends or whatever the case may be, in addition to what the tight ends and the running backs give you in the pass game. So, yeah, there is no Tyreek Hill in this team. But you talk about the Chiefs blueprint. Chiefs did okay after Tyreek got traded. So they have plans. And their receivers, I would argue they have more questions at receiver than the Bills do right now.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think what's the timeline on Rice? Is it 10 games?
I don't even know the timeline on him. Hollywood Brown's out with a shoulder injury. Right. Sky Moore hasn't worked out as a second-round pick. They drafted Xavier Worthy, who's a home run threat, but he weighs 160 pounds. So Justin Watson's the number 3. I think they're just going to sign Juju Smith-Schuster, who is not nearly the player he was 4 years ago, or however long ago that was.
Right.
I feel more comfortable with what the Bills have here. And the tight ends, you can give the edge to the Chiefs, but it's not like these guys are a bunch of tomato cans lining up a tight end for the Bills either.
For sure. I'm trying to look this up real quick just to see how I'm not seeing the timeline, but I think he was suspended for a little bit of time. But you're right. There's question marks, and it's funny. Like, there's a dynasty. I've been in a dynasty league with a bunch of college buddies for like 12 years, and there was this big trade this weekend where somebody gave up Jahmyr Gibbs and the 4th overall pick in the rookie draft for Travis Kelce and a 2026 first. He thinks he's got a win now roster. That's the argument. And maybe he's betting on Gibbs's health long-term. I'm not really sure, but that's a top 5 asset right now going in the next couple of years that I was just like blown away. And I was talking to some friends, and I'm like, I feel like we're an injury away, or maybe not even an injury away from the dissension of Travis Kelce and his effectiveness in that offense, because they have asked him to do so much for so long. We saw almost a preview of it in the regular season last year, and he went, superhero in the playoffs, but maybe that was the final stand. Maybe that was the end game, if you will. I really don't know if Travis Kelce is going to be the same player at what is going to be 36 this year.
Right. And I think, it's funny that load management was a term created for basketball players, but I think load management is a real thing when you talk about someone like Travis Kelce, because to your point, he didn't look to be Travis Kelce in December. Now he got juiced up once the playoffs rolled around. He returned to form. But also you wonder, his brother just retired. His brother's obviously older than he is. He's got things going on off the field with Taylor Swift, and I don't know how much in that world he wants to be in. Sometimes players like the Hollywood side of things as they get later in the career, and maybe that's something he's focused on. I have no idea, but you wonder with all the other competing interests and the age, how much longer he can do this. But like the Bills, they have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, so they're okay. And that's what I keep coming back to, that as long as you have a quarterback and you have a coach who understands what he needs to do and isn't getting in the way, I think you are positioned to be competitive each and every year.
Indeed. If you're watching on YouTube right now, hit that like button, subscribe to the Shout Bills podcast as well. We are catching up with Ryan Wilson from CBS Sports. He was in Rochester a couple weeks ago for Buffalo Bills training camp, and we are now less than 2 weeks away from the start of the regular season. We want you to become a Shout Buffalo Bills insider. You can do that by texting 716-528-6727. Gives you 24/7, 365 access to myself, Ryan Talbot, all of our analysis on all of the Bills news, Bills games, Bills practices, everything happens on the insider text line. And that is brought to you by Carrie C. Beyer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Litra, located at 237 Main Street in Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give them a call, 716-852-1234, or check out litrolaw.com. All right, we've covered the offense here, Ryan. Let's get into this defense because, Leonard Floyd comes over last year, has a really big impact in year one. I'd argue that impact significantly dwindled over the course of the season, and by playoff time, he was almost the invisible man. And I think paying him $10 million a year was never in Brandon Beane's in the cards for him. They go out and they bring in Dwan Smoot, who has kind of turned into that fourth edge rusher. They're going to rely on Javon Solomon, I believe, to make this roster as the fifth guy. But it's a big year for Greg Rousseau. I'm actually working on a story right now on him for the start of the season. And talking to Marcus West, the defensive line coach for the Bills, it's been about okay, you know what you're doing, but knowing what you're doing when you're also expected to play fast, that's been the thing that they've been waiting for him to click, and it's starting to. And he's out there putting his speed, his power, his size on guys a little bit differently. If he could stay healthy, we could be talking about him as one of the, breakout star candidates this season. I think the Bills defense really needs him to be.
Absolutely. And I'm a Steelers fan, so I was watching the Steelers Bills preseason game primarily for Justin Fields purposes and trying to talk myself into that, and it's not going so well. But Rousseau flashed in that game. He also, I don't remember if it was the Bears game or not, but he is big, he is strong, he is fast, all the things you're talking about. You want to see it consistently. But if you just saw a couple of those clips, you're like, okay, well, this guy's a top 10 pick, and there's no debate about it. And you mentioned Javon Solomon. Is there a pretty good chance he makes the team?
Solomon, yeah, he's in my 53-man projection.
Yeah, because I loved him coming out. The only issue with him coming out of Troy last year was that he was only 6 feet, 245. He looks like James Harrison, like when he gets off the bus. And you don't have to be 6'5". You don't have to look like Greg Rousseau to be effective. And sweet mercy, he was getting after it against the Steelers too. In fact, I think I tweeted out a couple of clips of him just destroying. He might have got after Broderick Jones, their first-round pick. I can't remember, but
that was a tough day for Broderick.
Yeah, we later learned that Broderick had a shoulder injury, quotation marks. So we'll mark it up to being banged up a little bit because he has to play better than that either way. But congrats to Javon for taking advantage of the opportunity. I think a lot of guys on the Bills made the team against in that Steelers game. But I love Rousseau, and I loved him coming out, and he was young then, and I get it's a developmental process, but it feels like, and you can tell me this, now more than ever in recent years, because of the injuries, because of the lack of depth and seniority, if you will, at safety, the front four have to get after it more than they have in years past. Milano's out. We don't know for how long. I think they like Dorian Williams. He's a great athlete. I think they like Terrell Bernard, another good athlete. But you've lost Poyer and Hyde, and you're trying to figure that out on the back end. I don't know how much Cole Bishop is expected to play. Now, he was banged up when I was out there with you at training camp the one day. So it feels like the defense has a lot of questions to answer. I like what Bob Babich has done. We'll see what his role ends up being. I'm going to imagine Sean's going to call plays, but it's good to have another voice in there and a guy whose dad has a long history of being successful in the NFL and who ain't afraid to get after it from what I've seen and heard in practice anyway.
If I was making a list of like the 7 most important Bills not named Josh Allen, I think 3 of them might be defensive line players. And I think it's Ed Oliver. I think it's Greg Rousseau. And I think you can make an argument for either Von Miller or Daquan Jones because it depends on what Von Miller's truly going to be this year. Like, is he going to come back and be a version of himself? Because if he's the guy that played last year, it's almost like you knock him down the pecking order, and it's like you really got to ask yourself some questions. If he's that guy, can he be out there? Now, the Bills, everybody you talk to, from Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, everybody, Von himself, we are about to see the old Von Miller come out against the Arizona Cardinals. We'll see. But to your point, this is a group that has to get after it up front. Not so much in September and October. They have to do it then. They got to do it in December and January, because that to me has been the biggest reason why they have not advanced in the playoffs, is that They get to the playoffs and their defensive line doesn't show up. Now they moved on from Eric Washington. I know he got a promotion to the Chicago Bears, but it felt like he wasn't going to be back either way, only because it's been on his unit over the last couple of years. You can't have Ed Oliver have the year that he had last year, finally close to 10 sacks, the pressure rate, the work that he did against double teams, and have him be just dead in the playoffs because you had to lean on him a little bit too much during the regular season. They got to be better up front, and they got to be able to sustain that for the season.
How is because I haven't watched him closely, but I liked him coming out of Duke. How's Dwayne Carter been?
He's been great. Up and down. I feel like he's trended upwards as camp is going on, and he's the key to the Ed Oliver point, because you now have a guy that you could truly throw out there. Like Jordan Phillips can't stay healthy. Tim Settle was just a guy. They had Shaq Lawson at times playing on the inside, and he's too small at this point in his career. So if Carter can come in and just play 40% of the snaps, that now gives you a guy that could spell Ed Oliver, keep him fresh, especially let him maybe even morph into that closer role in the games. You don't have to lean on him so much early in the game. You could truly go with a 50-50 split until you get into the fourth quarter, and then let your big horse go.
And that's the thing when I think about this from a draft perspective, is you got to hit on every first round pick. There's no sort of wavering there unless you're drafting a quarterback, which is 50-50. But when you can find guys day 2, day 3, late day 3 that can contribute, Christian Benford's a good example, then that's how you go from getting to January to getting to February, because you have the depth there to get you there. You talk about Ed Oliver being out of gas. Kyrie Elam hasn't worked out yet. He was a first round pick. Benford did. So, it's half dozen one. But when you are able to do that, and then things like, as I look through the roster, getting Rasul Douglas at the trade deadline was one of the sneakiest, best moves last year. Not just for the Bills, across the league. It was fantastic. And those little things add up, because anyone, Jerry Jones or who was it? It used to be Dan Snyder would pay Adam Archuleta and Antoine Randall and all those guys $500 million after they had great careers somewhere else. Anyone can do that, but it's Deion Sanders. Oh my gosh. Bruce Smith, as I get the Rolodex refreshes, but it's finding the guys from roster spots 40 to 53 that inevitably going to end up determining how far you get. And I think Brandon Beane's done a great job of that. And then these rookies are going to have to step up. Ray Davis is another example of a guy who, great backstory, but he's had a pretty good preseason as well. And he can spell James Cook, because James Cook is nor is he intended to be, I don't think, a 3-down back. He's a guy that you bring in and use him for specific purposes and a couple of series and then move on from there. I could be wrong on that, but that's how I envision it, especially with the Ray Davis now on the roster.
I just think that at his body type, you don't need to lean on him that way.
Right.
I mean, he's not going to be Derrick Henry out there grinding through 350 carries in a season. Why would you do that? Especially when you want him to be such a part of the passing game. There's a lot on his plate. And so to bring in a guy that's looks so ready to be productive in between the tackles, that to me is the perfect complement. So some of those tough physical runs, you want to get James Cook involved in the game. You want to get him some good runs, but I think spelling him and letting Davis kind of run a little bit is going to be interesting. I want to hit 2 more things before we go. One on Edwafon Ulofoshio. I was listening to a recent podcast, and it was from a couple of draft guys. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I already talked about it on the show before. And they were talking about how high they were on Ulofoshio during the draft process, and landing spot was going to be so important for him. He's been banged up most of the summer, and I think he's going to make the roster because he's a 5th-round draft pick. I don't think they want to chance it. I think a guy like Balin Spector, although they love the guy, he is hurt every single season, and he's hurt all summer once again. What are your thoughts on Ulofoshio? Because if Dorian Williams doesn't work here over the course of the first month, if it's not going well, Ulofoshio is a guy that seems, from what I've studied, to be pretty pro-ready. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a look if it goes south for Williams. Now, they're high on Williams to your earlier point, but just in case.
Yeah, I remember being at training camp and he was in civvies. He wasn't practicing. I liked him a lot coming out. I'm looking up my notes right now. 5th-round pick is where he went. I had him as an early day 3 guy, so I thought there's a little value there. Let me look at my notes. And in case anyone's wondering. Number one, I'm old. Number two, I watched 400 guys, so I got to refresh my memory. And when we turn the page on the draft season, I forget so many names. I'm already
That's
on.
So baller though that you got your notes sitting right there to go to round 5. Eddie Ulofoshio. That's pretty sweet, dude.
No, because I saw him with his T-shirt on at practice. Like, oh my God, they drafted him as well. Because I remember what happens, just behind the curtains a little bit. I don't watch all these guys in the fall, but before we go to the combine, I'll have the list of guys and I'll start going. I'll watch the linebackers together. So I was watching him and thinking, okay, I haven't heard a lot about him because we're talking about Michael Penix Jr. and the offense on that Washington team. And I said he moved smooth in space. He was twitched up, had the ability to stop, start. He can make offensive linemen miss in space and get to the ball. He can move on tape. How fast did he run? He ran 4.56, so he can move in real life as well. Bounce offs, tight end blocks. He can make running back tackle. He's a wrap-up tackler at the line of scrimmage. Has a nose for the ball, not a thumper, but he'll stick his nose in there and make plays. Thought he took good angles to the ball. So that's my little brief scouting report. I was impressed with him. He's a little older. He's almost 25 now, but whatever. I mean, he's on a rookie deal. 25 is 24 and change, is plenty young to play NFL football. So if he can stay healthy, and I'm not sure what was his injury. Was it soft tissue or something? Probably.
No, I think it was a calf.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So if he's healthy, man, he was a pleasant surprise when I watched him because I certainly didn't focus on him in the fall, as I mentioned. But he had himself a good combine. He's listed at 6'5", 236 or 6 foot 236, excuse me, at the combine. I don't know what he's at now, but that's what NFL linebackers look like these days. And the athleticism is certainly there, and the nose for the ball is certainly there. You know this, and I was watching one of my favorite players on this team, Buffalo Joe Andreessen. I believe he was at fault on the Bryce Young touchdown. I'm not sure. And I only mention that to say that that's the concern. You see this with cornerbacks, with wide receivers too, but even linebackers who are new to the NFL struggle with the playbook stuff. They don't struggle with the athleticism. So continuing to play fast is the concern when you talk about those sorts of players. But he was plenty fast at Washington.
The Ulofoshio injury was actually a rib injury, so it wasn't even a calf. So I think he'll probably be fine, ready to go. He played in that last preseason game, but yeah, that was a tough one when Joe Andreessen took over all the storylines for a week, and then to have it be one of those first plays in that game, that was a tough one. But again, like what do you think about this? The one caveat I put on that when we talked about a post game was like, to go from playing against the Steelers with all of the ones, so Ed Oliver up front, Daquan Jones, you're playing next to Dorian Williams, to now you're playing with literally guys that are going to be on the street. Like, they played third teamers for the most part in that game. That's a huge kind of difference week to week.
Absolutely. And I thought he had a great preseason from the snaps I watched. And look, man, we see guys blow coverages every single day. That doesn't mean he can't play NFL football. I don't know what his chances are making this team. He's a fun story and he plays hard. And I don't know if his path is going to have to be special teams only and as sort of a backup otherwise, practice squad or what. But he was a lot of fun to watch. There are a lot of snaps over the preseason where I watched him and said, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He flew all over the place to the ball in Pittsburgh. And those sort of things stick out. And my larger point is the one I'll come back to, is that you're a rookie. You don't know a lot of stuff. You're just, right. Everything is moving so fast. And, we were joking before that you stay out there at St. John Fisher, and it's a grind for, grown men just covering the team. Imagine having to go to meetings, get up at 6 or whenever, and you're running around all day, lifting weights. It's 100 degrees and just trying to keep your focus as someone trying to make a football team with facing the longest of odds. So I'm willing to give him some grace on that. I thought he had a really good training camp for what I saw, and the preseason was a lot of fun to watch. It just might be a numbers game at this point, but I think obviously if you're Joe Andreessen, you have nothing to be ashamed of.
For sure. Great stuff. I want to close on this before we get out of here. The AFC East is such an interesting conversation right now because I think the headlines a couple days ago where the Jets had been finally pumped above the Bills in terms of odds to win the AFC East. They're slightly lower odds, which I think is wild with all the questions facing.
That's all Fireman Ed bets.
Yeah. So if you look around right now at this division, obviously Drake May, we're doing this show after Drake May had his coming out party last night, it appears. It's a preseason game. We'll see. But like, who has the best quarterback situation outside of Buffalo right now? Because I think the easy answer is Tua in Miami because of all the success and the numbers last year and the weapons around him. But then there's also that December and January that I think have to put in its proper place. Now, Drake May hasn't had that opportunity yet to give us that, and that's a team with a lot of question marks. But what do you think? And then Aaron Rodgers is the great unknown. What do you think about this division and where all these teams kind of stack up?
Yeah, until the Dolphins can win in December and January, they're at least no better than second. So I think the Bills are the favorite for me right now. Miami's number 2 because from September till Thanksgiving, they'll score 50 points a game. I still go back to that Denver game last year where they dropped a 50 burger on Sean Payton. And I think part of it's Tua's ability to get the ball out quickly. And the other part of it's in Mike McDaniel's offense where the ball gets out quickly. And then you throw it to guys who run 4.2s, and that solves a lot of problems. The other part, I think Tua might actually have a bigger year this year than last year, as he's a year removed from all the Brian Flores stuff. And whatever side of that you come down on, you have kids, I have kids. If you tell your kid every day he sucks, whether he sucks or not, he's going to start thinking that he sucks. So it's not just 8-year-olds, it's 28-year-olds and 38-year-olds. So I think the positive reinforcement that Mike McDaniel's given Tua, fair or not, is probably made him a better player. And I think it'll continue along that path. I just don't know about the Jets. I don't know. We've seen Aaron Rodgers in his prime the last few years in Green Bay, where they're getting their asses kicked at halftime, and he'll just go into halftime like, all right, I'm done. He'll come back out. He'll go through the motions, but they're still losing by 14. I don't know what's going to happen if his team gets off to a slow start. The defense is awesome. I love Garrett Wilson. I love Breece Hall. I love Olafashinu. We'll see if 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers can sort of drag this offense to where it hasn't been in a long time. And Drake May had a great Monday night game and final preseason game. That offensive line, Matt, if we tried out for the Patriots, we might be able to make that roster at offensive line. And you and I combined aren't 330. So that group is borderline embarrassing how inefficient the tackles are. They have some guys in the interior that are pretty good. But Chuck Okorafor, who they signed from the Steelers, if you told me his mission was to get as many false starts as possible or penalties in that Monday night game, I'd be like, okay, well, he's very good at his job. Otherwise, they have some serious concerns to sort through. Drake May is going to be good. He's only 21. I would not play him, but, I don't run an NFL team and no one asked me. I just think it could be sort of a David Carr situation where he takes 75 sacks and never recovers. So that's the long answer. I think the Bills are the easy choice for me until the other 3 teams prove that they're something other than who we thought they were, to quote the great Denny Green.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ryan Wilson, bringing it. People are going to really enjoy this conversation. It's a nice setup here as we get into the first week. They'll practice a couple times this week, the Bills will, and then we'll get into preparations for Kyler Murray and company to come to Buffalo. Let everybody know where they can find your work and kind of what what to expect once the NFL season does start from a draft perspective.
Oh, yeah. No, with the First Pick Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, we're on YouTube as well. Me and Rick Spielman do it twice a week during the season. I get 3 times a week during the draft season. And we have a lot of fun. He's actually great and informative, and I ask him the stuff that fans typically want answers to that they can't get answers to because he knows everything. He was in the league for 30 years. So that, and I cover the league as well during the year on CBS Sports HQ, so you can check all that stuff out. And yeah, that would it's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing it. And the drafts at this point, as you know, Matt, NFL's 365. The NFL draft at 365 too. And I'll just say this before I leave. 3 things that infuriate people, and this is in random order: politics, religion, and mock drafts. So those are you're doing something right when you make everybody angry. And I managed to do that with those mock drafts. So
when's your next mock?
It came out Monday. Let me see. Okay. Let me tell you who I have the Bills taking. Last year, I got a lot of pushback from Bills media people in particular because I didn't have them taking wide receivers each and every mock draft.
Okay.
So let's see. I have the Bills taking Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver out of Ohio State.
Nice.
So I don't know if you would you want another back-to-back first pick wide receiver at this point?
I mean, yes, because I do like we talked about the Chiefs. Like, I like the Packers model too, right? Like,
Yeah.
where they
Oh,
go and
gosh.
get receivers every year, and then all of a sudden you look at the cupboards are well stocked. And so I think it's not something that you ever want to take a draft and not spend a draft pick, like maybe a day 1 or day 2 pick on a wide receiver. So I'm all in, and I guess I'll have a more informed opinion on that when we see rookie year Keon Coleman.
That's the thing. I mean, why are we doing mock drafts in August? But here we are.
I love it, man. Thank you so much, Ryan. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Matt.